Season 6, Episode 12, overall Episode 220 of the Decoded Podcast. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, sunshine.
That's what PG says to me all the time. He calls me Sunshine.
He got it from me.
He got it from you.
Yeah.
Just so everybody, all our listeners know, I've got this orange, um, what is it, a cord wrapper?
Cord wrap. Yep.
Cord wrap, and it looks like orange. Um, what did you call it, Chris?
Orange
Licorice?
licorice.
Yeah. I play with it sometimes when I'm on the computer, so I'm not playing with my food, just so you all know. Um, I have to say, Chris, so last weekend we did not have the Decoded podcast. I was in Michigan at a University of Michigan football game, but
In retrospect, was there any space? Could we have done a quick drop in? Like, you thinking back, was there any time, like, even to do a 15-minute live from Michigan kind of moment?
yes, yes, but I was with my son,
Mm-hmm.
and clearly he was my priority. So
Mm-hmm.
I, you know, I guess I could have said to him, "Hey," um, I guess I could have said once we got right into the stadium when it opened, so it was still like there was lots of space, not a lot of people, and we went right to the food because we mismanaged our morning drive and breakfast. It didn't work out the way I planned, which is okay. I left it up to him, and so what happened was we ended up at the stadium. I'm like, it was pretty awesome for him actually because I said, okay, you're having stadium food for breakfast. And he's like, that's not a problem, Dad. I'm like, okay, let's go. So we go as we're walking around the stadium, I'm letting him like get a feel for what's available. And then he finally lands on a few things and I'm like, get anything and everything you want. And he just looked at me like, what? I said, we're not doing this all day. Like, I'm not getting out of our seats and coming to get food with the crowds. I'm like, so knowing we're going to go for dinner after on our way home, get how whatever you want and how much of it you want. And it was interesting because I had to say it like 3 times because I don't normally operate that way with my boys. But I was like, this is a cool experience. It's going to be fun. So I could have said, once we get your food and drink, we're just going to go over here, park ourselves so you can eat. And I'm going to jump into the podcast with Clough for 15 minutes. I guess I could have done that on my phone. We could have made it work, but there were so many other things I had to consider that really wasn't high on the priority list of things to consider, unfortunately, just
Mm-hmm.
because, well, I'll tell you why. I both of my kids and my wife, they know that I take this podcast relatively seriously. So if it were um like at the top of my list, then maybe I would not have I may have mismanaged my son's cues or whatever at as I'm hanging out with them in Michigan. So anyway, yes, it was cold though, bro. Like we were warm in terms of like we were layered and ready, but as he's taking off his gloves to eat his hot dog, like he's like, Dad, it's cold. I'm like, I know. Eat your hot dog, get the glove back on so that you stay toasty or whatever. So it was cold. But now that I think back, I could have easily set up my phone on the stand where we were. It was a great view. You would have had a great view of Michigan Stadium on the inside. It would have been epic, actually, because there were not a lot of people. So for those 15 minutes, it just would have been cool, but whatever. Um, Lots of layers. And here's the best one, I would say, in terms of Decoded Podcast. Ben and I are sitting in our seats, and we're surrounded by a bunch of people from our school board. Um, Big thumbs up to Paul Gladding and Sean Spitzig, the two principals who organized this trip. So we're sitting there and we're hanging out, and behind me was a principal. He's now a principal, but he was my vice principal when I was at St. John's for half a school year, Chris Luciani. And as we're sitting there, it's a beautiful sunny Saturday right at this moment, freezing cold, and all I hear behind me is, join us on Decoded Podcast this morning. Grab your drink. He was basically saying all the things I tweet out in preparation for people to come over and hang out with us. So Ben laughs, my son laughs. And I look back at Chris, I'm like, dude, I didn't know you were a fan. And he's like, "Yeah, I see the tweets." And I'm like, "This is awesome." So it was just really cool sitting in the stadium Saturday morning. It's sunny, it's frigid, and Chris is behind me talking about the Decoded podcast. Would have been even more epic if I actually did the podcast with you while I was sitting in the stands. But again, lots of layers, trying to stay warm, trying to be in the moment with my son and the people around me. So it was just cool, man. If you were still on Twitter, you'd see that I tweeted about this morning. I would like to shift into that realm, though. I would love to hear from
Mhm.
you about you stepping away from Twitter, how you're feeling about that. Um, I'd love to hear it because I told you yesterday when you and I were communicating, I told you it did feel weird on my end because I had gotten so used to communicating with you on Twitter that
Mhm.
now a couple of times I'd see an article or something and I'd go to send it to you. I'm like, oh, he's not here anymore. So it was interesting for me. It is interesting for me to get used to. I called you my wingman. It goes both ways. Just you're not here anymore. So it was kind of weird. But I'd love to hear how you're feeling about it these days and how that's working out for you.
It's working out great. It's great. I don't, I put a wee I sort of put up a wee flare just a week before I was sort of checking out, just saying I'm heading out. I could be found over on Insta, or on my, I guess, my writing blog. You can connect with me there. I said if anybody wants to go direct, I said DM me. I'll send you my phone number. We can text or whatever. A couple people did. A couple people did. They reached out and they said, "Hey, here's my digits. Um, happy to stay connected with you." And that was it. I was like, "Okay, peace." And I don't. It's funny the way, I mean, the way tech is designed, eh? Like they tell you flat out, like in order to sort of take appropriate measures to do this, you also have to get rid of, like, I've erased I use something called LastPass. So it's just my password manager. I can't keep it all in my head. So it's basically it's an app, a product that locks all of my passwords inside of it. And I have one master password. So if when I log into a browser, if I'm running the extension, it'll populate it for me. So my autofill doesn't come from the browser, it comes from this lockbox extension. And I've erased my Twitter stuff out of it because part of one of the behaviors is that if I accidentally go to the Twitter website, which can happen so easily, click on a link, if I don't read it correctly and see, which I'll address that part too. But basically, the accidental reopening of my account can be done up to 30 days afterwards. And then you have to go through the process again and the clock restarts. So, yeah, the breaking of my behaviors, which is the other part to this, is of the, standing in line or having mental downtime and thinking, actually, not even thinking. It's the unthinking or not thinking element that I started to notice about taking out my device, going on, and the nearest reference is that idea of doom scrolling. But it was not. I don't have a problem with doom scrolling. What I have a problem with is that I realized I wasn't making any decisions about the doom scrolling. So it's about my agency, right? That I've given up my agency to this tool. And I know that I can't, or I know that I'm not prepared to stop using social media or different online platform tools. So how do then the third layer to it becomes where the spaces that actually do interest me. And interesting to me than what's become more interesting to me is what sort of creative tools do I have at my disposal. So you've seen for a while, like I really enjoy taking photos. I like writing. I like messing with video a little bit. I like to paint and draw. So that's the stuff that um, really synthesizes my experiences as a human being in this world. Like it just allows me to draw together, interpret, push out, produce, respond to, have some feels. I like the creative tools. And for for that criteria alone, there's nothing creative about Twitter. Like there's for me, there's nothing creative about using Twitter. It's pure consumption. And to that end, that doesn't feel like I'm in a relationship with Twitter. I'm not. It's, again, it comes down to the sympathetic response, standing in a line, pull out the phone, open it up, scroll through it, find nothing, shut it down. Um, and I don't worry too much about wasting time. I do. I still waste a lot of time in other spaces. But I'm almost thinking to myself, I want to take back more time so I can waste it in places that actually I enjoy. So um I don't this past week, I may have accidentally I haven't opened the app at all because I've erased it. So I don't have the app on my phone anymore. I don't have the link on my browser anymore. I did accidentally open up a link. I didn't read the URL properly, and it actually took me to Twitter. And I was pleased to see that it didn't activate my account. It just let me view it like as if you didn't have a Twitter account. It was a free tweet. It was an open tweet. A very far, but um part of the criteria, I don't know where it is in the stack, but it's closer to the bottom, where one, Elon taking it over. I'm not sure that I like that individual as a human being. Um, I don't know if I trust that individual. And to be a part of something, it's like not knowing if you trust your boss. You sort of I fundamentally ask myself, can I still operate under these kind of conditions, knowing that I don't trust the boss? And I do look at Elon now as the boss, and I don't know if I trust him. So anything that comes from him or his influence, I wonder whether or not I can trust as well. That was reinforced the moment that he put Trump back on Twitter. The moment that he used a poll to put Trump back in the driver's seat on Twitter. And Trump has kind of said, yeah, I'm not coming back. I'm going to keep, I forget what his is, Social Truth or The Truth or whatever his other app that Trump Industries has sort of put together. I think he has said, I don't know if I'm going to come back there. He's going to exist there. That didn't give me any sigh of relief because I felt like that decision alone to allow individuals to use a platform that really have done nothing, I think, overall to make humans better. Like, not a single thing. I can't think of and I want to. I can't think of a single thing that I would say Trump has done to make anyone's life any better other than his own, um, or to improve humanity's worth whatsoever. So that was like further down the line, but I think I also knew as soon as I saw Elon come on, I thought I want to watch and see how this changes things. One last piece to this, and I've seen a few people doing this. I investigated Mastodon, which seems to be the alternative flavor right now. And what was funny, what I realized is I couldn't stand looking at the interface. I couldn't stand it. Could not stand looking at it. Felt clunky. Didn't have any of the didn't have any of the simplicity and fluidity that what so here's my thinking. I'm like, okay, who's going to use this? This looks terrible. Yet people are starting to use it, which is fine. Um but I thought to myself, what I loved was if this is the current alternative and I already hate it, I said, then I think I can walk away from these types of these. I put Twitter and Mastodon as similar tools, but they're not. They do operate differently. But because people are suggesting that Mastodon's the alternative, right away you make a connection. Well, if they become salt and pepper, like, well, if you're not going to use Twitter, go ahead and go use Mastodon. But the truth is, I test drove Clubhouse too. I was playing with Clubhouse for a little while and realized that's not for me either. I didn't really enjoy I didn't enjoy using it. I tried to enjoy it. I tried to keep up with it. I tried to kind of connect with it. Um, so ultimately, here I am using Insta. I still have Insta and Facebook. I'm in with Meta, I guess. Zuckerberg's got me. I use the WhatsApp. Also got rid of my TikTok, got rid of Snapchat. I don't have those either anymore. I did have them. I was playing around with them, so those are all deactivated as well. So that's where I'm at. Um, I'm I mentioned, at the beginning, I too feel that, I'm now missing. It's funny. It's funny because yours and my friendship in the beginning was entirely categorized by the different social media things that we had. We would text, then would maybe flip over to Insta and then over to Twitter. It created kind of like a fluid conversation space just to kind of share different ideas. And then using Marco Polo, and then of course Decoded Podcast. So I did have the feels like, there were people on there that I thought, oh man, like I'm actually removing a communication pathway here. But what I realized is that the individuals that I had a deep sense of connection to, I had other ways to connect with them. And I started to look at my social media, like for the most part, um, the people that are really important to me on Twitter, I either have their phone number or I have them on another platform. So, what I was getting rid of or what I was sort of removing from my social circles on Twitter, in some ways were a lot of individuals that I have nothing invested in because I still had connections to people otherwise. And that became a really, I think, a more important um, factor than I'm somehow losing something by leaving Twitter. It was like I'm gaining a concentration or an intensity in another space. Last thing I'll say, there's always a last thing. It's my version of your version of this is I got to let you go. And then you'll say something else. Me, I'll say one last thing. And someone listening will be like, he said four last things. Um, when I started to look at the people, like, the flavor of interaction, depending on the social media platform, all of a sudden became important too. So there were people that I was following on Twitter that I also follow, let's say on Insta. And I thought to myself, I like the version of them better on Insta. I like being around that part of them. And it kind of reminds me like this is kind of how I think IRL life works. Like there are people that I know that I hang around with in real life that I enjoy being around them because I enjoy that particular sport or that going out for that particular food or because we share a common interest in music. Um there's a very, very short list of individuals. You are on this where I think to myself, yeah, I like the tweets. I like the Insta. I like the videos where I can kind of say broadly, I kind of dig how the individual is sharing out contents on all these different platforms. That's a very short list of individuals that do that. Everybody else kind of had their space where I felt like I was getting the more authentic version of them. So that became an interesting little kind of bit of analysis is knowing the person and then knowing them through these different lenses that they use, I was actually thinking to myself, which is the one that I would rather spend time connecting with? Do I want to connect with their art side? Do I want to connect with their political side? Do I want to connect with their family side? Like what's the feed if I'm being selfish that I want to be a part of? And so that also played into it is that on Twitter, for the most part, what I was feeding myself with there was a dimension. There's a dimension of these people that I'm being fed with that I kind of thought, like, I'm not really interested in this about you. I like your paintings over here, or I like the jokes that you tell over here. I like that better. I like how you're kind of using that to tell jokes or share funny animal memes. So that was it. That's the whole deeper thinking. I would say definitely this time it was far less reactionary. I felt more strategic ultimately. Hmm.
I appreciate your perspective and your process and your response to that. Um, I certainly do miss having you around there, but again, like you said, I run into you on Meta, Facebook, Instagram. Like you and I, it's kind of funny actually the way we just communicate over a number of different mediums, right? Like
And it's not tiring. I think that's what's kinda cool. Like, I dig what you post up in different places. So it's not like we're constantly running in and there's nothing kind of I think this is also, I mean, if there were individuals on Twitter, again, generally speaking, that they just keep sharing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And that's fine, but you like, I just realized, well, I don't have to stay around for the encore. I don't. I can get out in my car and start heading home. So the one thing I will say, I think the 2 of us are, because we kind of explore different things, it's kinda like you come back to the conversation with new experiences, and that's important. One of the things that I said I kinda dig that I dig, and I didn't realize I would, is that even though you and I share a lot of information, we still arrive on Saturday and one of us drops something like, "Whoa, yeah, cool." Like something that's going on that still didn't make it to one of the feeds. So it's a rich bit of conversation. I dig.
There's no shortage of methods of communication that you and I experience daily. It's actually, now that I think about it, it's kind of funny. See something on Insta, hit you up with it. Facebook, not so much, but like, because you don't use Facebook the way other people use Facebook. So sometimes I forget you're there, but then sometimes I'm like, no, no, he's here. He's just called this, and this is what he does here. Um, which again, that's fine. And then there's the, Marco Polo, and there's the texting. Like this morning, I texted you from my work phone, right? Because that's what was in front of me. So it's
Mhm.
work phone, personal phone, Insta. Like I remember there was a time when you would actually call me on the telephone to chat on Fridays when you were driving home or whatever. We haven't done that in a while. That's old school.
Mhm.
The issue with phone calls is that they're just not as stealth as a text. So, like for example, um, I don't know when this was, where I said to the kids, "Hey, just so you know, I'm gonna be talking to Chris." They're like, "Oh, like synchronously or asynchronously?" I'm like, "Asynchronous, but it's gonna appear as though it's synchronous." And they're like, "Oh." I'm just like, "Just be prepared when you hear me." This is what I do in my house now. I just say to everybody, "I'm gonna be talking to somebody in a minute. So if you hear me blabbing in the other room, I'm talking to somebody. Like I'm 'Cause it alleviates the, "What's dad doing?" "Dad, what are you doing?" It's like, I'm talking to somebody, so I kinda prep them. Um, or if I know I'm getting a phone call, right, from, one of the handful of people that do talk to me on the phone, I'll grab my earpiece and I'll connect it to the phone, and when I have that in my ear and I'm talking, everybody know, "Okay, dad's on the phone." And that way, um, I don't have to hold a phone to my head, and I don't have to have them on speaker where they say all kinds of things that maybe is not appropriate. So it's like, no, I'm gonna do this phone call, and I'm gonna have the earbud in my ear so everybody can hear what I'm saying, but nobody's gonna hear what the person on the other end is saying. Um, but I have to say, generally speaking, I despise the telephone, and I've become more comfortable expressing that to people. So when
Mhm.
somebody says to me, "Give me a call," I say to them, I really don't like to use the telephone. So why do I need to call you when I can text you? Well, it's easier, maybe for you, but it's not for me. So how about you do me a solid, and we continue this conversation. I'm not calling you. So the conversation ends, or it's going to have to happen another time because I don't want to use the telephone. And we were kind of talking about this on the on ramp. I've gotten to the point where I'm just tired of doing things that other people want me to do because like it works for them. No, it's time for me to step up and start doing what works for me. If we don't have to talk on the phone, then we're not going to talk on the phone. I don't want to talk on the phone.
Right.
And I don't want you coming to my door ringing my doorbell unannounced. Do it, and I won't answer the door. So last week it happened twice, last week or the week before. Twice. We're in the house, we're doing whatever, doorbell rings. And I'm like, I look at my phone, because if it's my in-laws or if it's my sister-in-law, they'll text and say, "Hey, I'm at the door. Can you open the door?" Of course, then no problem. But if you're not one of those people, I'm not answering the door. I'm not going to the door. It's it's this like landing here that brings me comfort. I'm not living for everybody else anymore. I live for my family, but I don't want to talk on the phone. So now I'm pushing back on the doctor's offices and stuff too. Like the last time I had to go to the doctor's office to pay for something,
Yeah.
and I said, I know you guys and gals don't want to use the email because then you'll be flooded with emails. But I'm like, I don't want to call you.
There's
Yeah.
also an accountability chain too, that there might be liability where they've said, right? They,
Fair
because part
enough.
of it is there would be no information, then they're on account, right?
I
They're
get that.
documented, yeah.
I totally get all that. I do, but I still
But
don't
you
want
can
to talk
still
on the
say,
phone.
yeah, I was gonna say, you still say, I don't want that shit, whatever.
So I laughed because they recently moved to an online process where you can book an appointment online. And I'm
That's
like,
handy. I like that.
bonus. So I can
Do you
book
get
an
to choose
appointment online.
can you get, as far as the online thing, can you choose a phone call instead of a face to face?
Yes, you can choose phone call, virtual, face to face.
That's where we
My
are.
my doctor is very innovative. When I
Yeah,
met him years ago, he was doing stuff that, like, I'm like, hey, my doctor does this, and people are like, he does, and I'm like, he calls it experimental, but I like doing it this way because we've arrived at these times. Like,
innovative.
well, you can't call it innovative anymore because everybody's doing it, but it was once
If it's
innovative.
human centered, that was the thing. This
Fair
is
enough.
actually, yeah, yeah, I like it. If
But
everyone's
like,
doing, I get that part too.
I'm gonna tilt now over to this
Do
whole
it.
business of like we went virtual during COVID. I know COVID's still here. I'm just pretending like I'm everybody else and that it's gone. But we went virtual and now we pull back on that. We pull back. It's like no more virtual. But it's okay for the teachers to go virtual the minute that we can't be in class with the kids. But
Mhm.
then we can't go virtual with anything else. This is the perfect time for me to swear. I'm not going to, but it is the perfect time because I think it's BS that it's there and we all know it's the virtual options there, but we're going to put it aside now because it's a pre-COVID thing, unless we can't go to school and then teachers turn on your computers, light it up and go virtual, but we can't do it for anything else. Come on, man. That's just dumb.
Do you think we were talking about this actually in class. We listened to a podcast. There's this NPR has this great. Here's me being a here's Clough teacher sharing resources. There's a podcast on NPR called Shortwave, and they're fantastic. The episodes are 12 minutes long. Let's say about 10 minutes, because there is transition and blah 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 chatter in there as well. So let's say they're 10 to 12 minutes long, and they're always really really interesting, like science based topics. And we've been using them in class. I've been in my learning strats class. We've been working through um, better question and answering, so asking better questions, and asking questions that are actually important to you. You don't feel like you're just adding a question because you feel like you have to fill the silence. And my students, my grade 9 students, have never done. It's fascinating, eh? In the realm of literacy and literacy development, I'm coming to suspect there isn't a lot of work done on working on questioning, writing good questions. We're really fascinated with the answers, getting to the answers, framing the answer, structuring the answer, clarifying the answer, commodifying the answer, and then posting out, sharing the answer. But actually developing question techniques, I almost feel it's a little bit of an untapped space in EDU. So that was this unit. That was one part of the unit. We were working on asking better questions and then using those questions as inquiry. So I'm doing my own kind of uh dive into Clough Query. Uh Props to who's it, Trevor McKenzie, whoever he wrote that book. I think it's Trevor McKenzie. Anyways, do my own version of it. But what this brought to light was, not only that the kids weren't all that great at asking questions, but they weren't, because they didn't have some of the skills to ask questions, they weren't able to access the fullness of the world around them. it was like it was coming to them as a singularity, and they weren't able to parse it out and take a single experience and say, how can I break this apart into, who, what, why, when. Sorry, I totally mashed that. The W's and the H. And then also kind of create a hierarchy there, as in understanding that the how and whys actually draw you further down. Like the how and whys are like the 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 multiplier on a what, when, where, who kind of question. And in doing that work, part of the summative that we did was I had them listen to a podcast that was produced in late April of 2020. And it's a really cool episode because it talks about the science behind this. The science behind the actual episode is how we remember. The how, like, how is memory formed? And they've done some really great episodes about talking about the hippocampus, or the hippocampus, talking about the prefrontal cortex, talking about the amygdala, talking about the different chunks of the brain where memory can be created and stored and how it's formed. But this particular one was talking about, the title is something, what we'll actually remember about the pandemic. So it's like time. First off, it's like time travel, bro, because like watching the pandemic from a teacher perspective has been fascinating. Like I'm trying to come at this really coolly because it's lit up so many topics that prior to March 13th, 2020 just did not exist. They weren't there in education. And the assumption that we're at a stage of well, as one of my kids said, we're no longer in pandemic, we're now in endemic stage, which I can agree with. We're not in the short term anymore. We're now in something that we're just going to be consistently kind of working on. Um, he's my one science kid that always hits me hard for clarity, so I appreciate his clarity in class. Um, but what's really cool about that episode is there's a bit of a time travel element to it, and you're sitting there listening to what they're theorizing. Sorry, what they're speaking quite clearly about human memory and the way the brain works, and projecting, talking to me from the past 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, talking about what I'm actually going to remember about the pandemic. And as they're talking about it, I'm like, they're so right. They're so right. And I won't go through that. But anybody listening, you listen, like, check it out. It's a cool episode. I think it might be April or May 2020, shortwave from NPR. And so um where I land on this is that the at that time as well, so if we're taking that exact same time in May, we pretty much had access to the full suite of tools that we were about to use moving into the pandemic. They were all there. Zoom was already there, Google Meets was already there. We had all the tools. And then we spent 2, felt like 10 maybe, 2 years in a reactive mode, creating online communities of learners attached with school boards through the school board lens. Here's why I end with this. That's a pretty good test drive for a test drive, not only a test drive, but a way to build an infrastructure. And I think you and I remember an episode, I remember saying it that summer when we were talking about using the digital stuff. I said to you, you said to me, this ain't going away. This ain't going away. Now that they've built this infrastructure, the government can like grab it right away. What I'm mind blown at is that we've spent 2 years test driving this in millions of different iterations, so many different teachers using this. And yet it feels like we're coming back to the point that this system just can't be used. Like that seems to be the biggest, brightest, glowing assessment of doing online learning, is that we are still in the space of, this is harmful to kids, it is harmful to teachers, this is not a version to be used. And then we shrug. And I'm kind of, when you talk about the doctor, I said innovative, but the doctor finally using these things, I still, in some ways, I'm really confused. I don't get it why we don't why these digital tools still aren't actively a part of our schooling. I and it's not because I don't see all the factors and the complexities. That has actually made it more confusing to me. It actually has made it more confusing to me. To the point, you're hearing it first, to the point where I've considered in the next staffing rollout to put my name in to actually teach virtually in my board to see firsthand, because I almost feel like to willingly say, because our school has a virtual high school, but to see what that looks like right now when it's no longer directly associated with pandemic response. And again, if I say that we're no longer pandemic mode, we're actually in endemic mode, that really, I think, changes, or it should change, how we navigate our realities. Like, imagine at some point where, getting the cold virus created a similar upheaval of a response in communities because it seemed so terrible, mystical, out there. What is this sickness? Why is this person having like, at some point, that sickness also was like a radical discovery and had deep impact on communities. Now it's become endemic. Like, now we know cold season. We say cold season. We're not surprised by it coming back around again. In the same way, winter brings snow and spring brings rain. Like, we've made it common, and it doesn't impact progress in the same way that I'm imagining it did at some point, for better for worse. So again, as we move forward, I just don't see, if we're accepting the fact that this is something that I can remember talking to my doctor last year sometime, and his forecast was that this year in 2022, he thought that the flu shot and by the way, I got to go props to my doctor, David Yip. He was the first time I'd ever heard this. He talked about um the flu shot and COVID shot as technology. And I think you and I talked about this. I had never thought about that as technology. And he had actually said, going into the this flu season in 2022, they will have refined the technology to the point where the flu shot and COVID shot will be one shot that you get. They'll just harmonize it. And he said that'll be the clear indicator that this is the way we're going to deal moving forward. Went deep medical on this, but if we're accepting that we have we have the infrastructure to be able to do teaching in this way, and I feel like we also have to accept that the school boards as a system are going to activate whatever tools they need in order to keep kids in class. I'm still kind of mind blown at the resistance to people wanting to make this a better system in some way. Like, generally speaking, I don't run into a lot of people in the halls each day that actually say they enjoy doing the digital learning. I even feel like some people are being complete reactionary, and they're using paper and analog tools just to sort of spit in the eye of that part of the system, which is fine. They can, whatever, their choice. I dig that your doctor's doing these calls. I think everyone should. I think our school board should. We should not be bound to being in a room for our staff meetings. I think PD days, if it's sit and get, I think we should be able just to log on and get the information.
So, dude, this is where I land here. A couple of things I want to say. First of all, my doctor started the online stuff, the virtual online like sign up and stuff before COVID. And then what happened was when COVID hit, he shut it down. He's like, I'm shutting down all the,
Was it
I'm
fire
shutting,
hose? It was just going to be too much,
yeah,
or
I think it was
oh
going to
yeah,
be like, no, it
there's
was,
no infrastructure for it.
this is how I took it. I took it as, let me try this new innovative thing that not a lot of people are going to buy into, so I can start slow and I can learn it and build it, and it's not going to get in the way of my practice. COVID hits, And remember when it hit, it was chaos. Like nobody knew, everybody was scared. Like we didn't have any information. So then I remember getting an email from the doctor's office saying the online component of like getting a doctor's appointment is gone for now. Call the office if you need something. Okay. And I was sad because I was like, this sucks because now I got to call again. Calling a doctor's office is gong show. I'm sorry. You put on hold. You're triaged by the admin person that you don't know what they're going to do with you. Sometimes they're rude because they're inundated and overwhelmed. I could go on and on about the story, the narrative of calling a doctor's office for an appointment, but I'm not going to. Um, or even if you don't need an appointment, you just need something else and you're on hold for an hour and they want to talk to you at this time, but you're a teacher, so you can't, like, it's circus, okay? It's back now. Like the last time I was at the doctor, I saw it on the wall. There was like the what are those things? QR code. It's like scan here. So I took a picture of it and I said to my wife when I got home, I'm like, that's it. If we ever need an appointment down the road, non-emergency, just tell me and I'll go online and I'll make the appointment. She's like, awesome. Like I can pick the doctor's assistant, I can pick the doctor, it can be virtual, it can be telephone, it can be in real, like face to face. I love it. Okay. But it did go away for COVID because it was so new at the time. The doctor was trying to figure it all out that it was like, no, I'm going to get slammed online. I'm not, because the phones are like off the hook anyway. So there's that. I have heard flu shots and stuff being referred to as technology, and I love it because I like that stuff. So I'm like, yeah, it's technology, you know. So I remember the first time I heard that, and I was like, it was one of those. I looked around, like, did the guy just say, or the gal, whoever, that it's technology? I think that's so cool. Um, and then I want to talk about the. Okay, so we can use the digital platforms to teach the digital learning. We can do it that way. And I've heard a lot of people tell me it sucks. They don't like teaching that way. And that's fine. But we've been told to move in that direction when it works for the school boards and the ministry. So then I'm with you. Why can't we do staff meetings virtually? Why can't we do um, why can't we offer parent interview night virtually? Why? Like why they weaponize it. They use it for what they want it for, but for nothing else. I got a problem with that. Not only do I have like a personal problem, but I have an equity problem. Um, I recently had an email back and forth with my son's high school principal, and I'm lit up about a couple of things happening at the high school right now. One of the issues is that my son's in grade 11. In grade 9 and 10, with all the chaos that was happening, I never missed one parent teacher interview. Okay. They were online, they were virtual, and the way that the system was set up for me to sign up for the appointment worked for me. It was all digital. On this day, you can go into the computer system and you pick and choose which teacher and what available times they have. Okay. This year, we went back to old school, and I was notified from the school that my son would get a slip of paper, and it was up to him to go from teacher to teacher to get the appointment time. Well, I'm sorry, that didn't work for us. And my son was sick on one of the key days. Um, where he had to be in the building to get this. And sure, I could have emailed every teacher and said, I could have done that, but I didn't because it was a pain in my rear end. So what happened was I didn't do parent teacher interviews this time around. Um, and, and like my son has some learning difficulties. Um, and so putting it on him was just another layer that was going to cause difficulty, right? So um, there are some kids that are go-getters that will grab that paper and they'll go and get it done ASAP over their lunch or whatever. That's not my kid. So knowing that he was sick, knowing that I had no control over the situation or no perceived control, it has led to some issues now. Okay, so I emailed the principal. I'm like, why can't we at least go back to signing up for our face-to-face meetings digitally? To have my son walk around with a piece of paper and negotiate times with his teacher is not going to happen. And I don't say that in a way that is like, I don't, my son can't do anything. That's not how I'm saying it. I'm saying 16-year-old, um, that's not his priority. He's got other priorities, got other things in mind. It's just not going to work for us. So why can't we do this at least digitally? Sign up for our appointments. Um, the principal offered some information about how this came to be. So it's just interesting that, yeah, we can use digital, we can weaponize it, and we can use it when we need it to work. But for anything else that can make something more efficient or effective, we're not doing it. And I have to say, at the end of the day, I'm thinking that the system just doesn't trust their employees. They don't trust us. Because if they did, then they would say, okay, staff meeting is on Tuesday at this time. If somebody's got to run out, or if somebody wants to get home before it starts, or they don't want to be at school for it, they can put it on their phone as they're driving home, and then when they get home they can continue with it on their phone or whatever. um, there's a lack of trust, in my opinion. I'm not sure where it comes from or why, um, but that's what I feel. We're not trusted. um, so it's a pet peeve of mine, you know, for a couple of reasons. I just don't understand. If the genie's out of the bottle, the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's not going back in. So why are we pretending like we can sit
Do
back?
another metaphor. Do another metaphor. One
Those are
more.
my
Come on.
those are
Flex,
my
flex,
best
flex.
those are my best ESL ones.
There's no going
'Cause
back, eh? No going
there's
back.
no going back, but they pretend like we've gone back
Mhm.
for whatever their political reasons are. Like, let's call it what it is. There are reasons that don't work for them. Who cares about the masses, though? I don't get it, bro. And look, I tell you, I say it again. I know teachers who despise teaching digitally, virtually. I get it. But if they have to endure that, then why aren't we milking the digital for everything else? Why aren't we using it for everything else? If we can use it to teach people online, why can't we use it for other things? Why is it not an option that is on the menu all the time now? Why? In my role, I laugh sometimes when I message a parent or a principal that I would like to meet with. Say, you tell me what you prefer: face to face, telephone, which I told you I don't like, or face to face, telephone, or virtual. You let me know what works for you. And some people, like the last principal I talked to said to me, virtual. I can do virtual on this day, on in this afternoon. Send me an invite. Epic. It was done virtually. Awesome. I could be in two places at the same time. Isn't that miraculous? Now imagine if I say no, I'm not doing virtual. It's face to face. I don't even want to talk on the phone. No, well, Roland, why is Roland being a tyrant? Why isn't Roland ready to serve? Doesn't he want to talk to me about this? Why is he delaying this? There could be all these things said. Roland doesn't want to be called a tyrant right now. So Roland makes everything available on the menu. How can I communicate with you? What's going to work for you? Isn't that service? So let's see how it goes. At the moment, I'm wide open. I'm wide open, ready. I'm ready. How do you want to communicate with me? Students, this is my last one. One of my students, the last time I saw this student, we talked about their difficulty getting to school. And the student disclosed to me that what happens sometimes is things happen at home and the student just doesn't go to school for 2 weeks. And that leaves a huge hole in learning and socialization and positive patterns that humans need to grow and develop. Okay. So I talked to the student about, okay, what can we do to minimize those gaps? Like, let's talk about this. And then boom, we we fall into a hole. Don't see the kid for 2 weeks. I can't get him on the phone. I can't get him virtual. I can't see him outside of his house. I don't see him at the school. I can't see him. He's in the hole, right? Finally comes out of the hole the other day. I get an email from the school. They're like, he's here, he's here. So I joked with the principal. I'm like, I burned rubber to get to the school to meet with this kid. So we sit down and I'm so happy to see, like, my message to the student is, I'm just so happy to see you and talk to you because I've not been able to connect with you in any way, shape, or form. So my joke was, do I need to create a TikTok account, a Mr. C teacher TikTok account so that I can communicate with you? Student laughs and says something. And then I'm like, okay, so how do I do this? The student says, well, I'm on these social media platforms. I said, perfect. I have a teacher account on this one. Can we talk on this one? Student's like, yeah, for sure. I'm like, awesome. Um, and then when I report back to the principal and the social worker and I tell them, okay, this is what we talked about. This is how I'm going to communicate with this kid. Is it outside the realm of what teachers do? I would say generally, yeah, but I don't live in the realm of what classic teachers do anymore.
Mhm.
I live on the periphery where I'm a weirdo now, like like the kids are labeled for not going to school. So I'm the weirdo teacher working with the weirdo kids, if that's what you want to call them. I need to find ways. Now, does it mean I'm inappropriate? No, no, it's all appropriate, but it's how can I meet you? How can I work with you? And I said to the kid 2 or 3 times, if you don't want to communicate with me this way, you need to tell me now. I'm not going to yell and scream. I'm not going to get all upset. I need to work with you in a way that you're good with it. And it's funny because at the end he's like, "No, Mr. C, it's fine. Let's just talk this way. It's fine." I'm like, "Okay." I just don't want to be one of many teachers who who gets you to comply when really you don't want to. Because that's why you're in this situation in the first place. So I'd like to move away from that as best as I can. Everybody's like, "That's awesome. What an innovative." It's not innovative. It's just I need to talk to you. Where do I meet you to talk to you? Anyway, Rochelle has a comment. Rochelle,
Hi,
thank you.
Rochelle.
Madame says, I am grateful that the FNMI consultant and equity officer are still doing our meetings online. Um, Thumbs up to both of those people.
Why?
Thanks.
I would love to know why. And this is one of those, well, no, this isn't me being the a-hole. I'm actually curious because I like to hear people's rationales. I want Rochelle's rationale because I don't want to assume I don't, and I mean part of it is, this can sometimes in my classroom we talk about red, yellow, green questions. So this might be kind of a yellow question. It's kind of that in between. And we talk about in class because my kids, their blurt factor is high. So they'll just ask that question. And then the question isn't even, it's asked in a way that activates someone's defense mechanism. It triggers their amygdala, doesn't really get into their frontal cortex at all, as in, hey, that's a really good question. Like that mindfulness, you and I like, that's a good question. Tough question. I'm going to choose not to answer it. It says, like, I'm not going to answer that question. So it's a yellow question. But I am curious about the rationale as to why that is a useful or a compassionate or an equitable, a savvy, an innovative? Like, what's the thing for Rochelle that makes them glad that those two consultants are still operating that way? And this is the conversation that I think doesn't get teased out, much like how to ask better questions in literacy classes, right? Um, this is the operating system that I think we need to spend time investigating and really kind of taking to heart and mapping out that utility and kind of anchoring it in our conversation so that we don't get too caught up in assuming people like this. I think it would be really important to know why. Sorry, Rochelle didn't say like, appreciate. Why is this appreciated? Rochelle, you're on.
Okay, I'll put up Rochelle's comment if she chooses to comment and answer your question.
Yeah.
Dominique, thanks for checking us out this week. She says if we really are going to meet students and people where they're at, it needs to include the digital pathway in all areas. That is where some people are most comfortable and accessible.
Mhm.
And
I think
listen,
it's
oh, go ahead.
I am. No, I'm gonna take your directive. You be authoritarian. I am listening.
I know some people abuse the digital pathway. It's not, you know, it, I know, okay? Some people abuse it. Some people abuse the face to face too.
Yeah, some people make
Any,
crappy lesson plans. Like it's
like it happens.
yeah. I think where we're at is asking better questions. I think we're now in a space having spent, let's say, the 2 years, 2.5 years developing digital learning. There is no automatic. Okay, so if we're living equity in our edu spaces, that means there is no one automatic response to supporting edu. And this, in fact, makes, and this is kind of like the heart of equity, it makes edu messier. Now, edu self-correction tools are powerful, right? um Damn, the fact that we think, certain tropes within education should stay, like some of the tropes of education that have just consistently made it through. There's as many that you could argue that are effective pedagogy, as in, well, we just keep doing it because this is our thing. Like we're in this space now of pulling the tropes apart and saying, yeah, but that one's kind of harmful. And then waiting for someone to say, well, it's only harmful for that cohort. And we say, exactly. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend time either reducing harm, removing harm, or boosting that actual marginalized experience. We're gonna do that work. Like that's where we're at. Kind of like, a few episodes ago talking about innovation. We can no longer talk about innovation as using Twitter or even leaving Twitter. Like you can't hang it on that. You can't hang it on that. So using digital now is just, it is a part of the experience of education. The conversation's done. Sorry, the debate is done. It is here. So now, before it becomes a trope in the way of people kind of doing the eye rolling, like, oh my God, there we go again, talking about doing online learning. Come on, massive online courses, MOOCs back in the day were running forever. These idea that people could take courses at a university somewhere on the other side of the world. And then at the end, you want the full course, you pay the little extra to get your diploma, right? Like we've been offering this forever. If people are willing to buy into it, I think for me, this is my starting point. If I have 30 kids that want to take an online version of English, we must give it to them in the exact same way that we say they must take grade 9 English. It must be offered. To offer grade 9 English and to make it mandatory means we must offer a path to that course that suits the kid. Hands down. That's it. And I think anyone that wants to stand in the way of staying, and maybe we're talking about a timeline here that we're too close to the page. Maybe this is like 3 years, right? So, in order to get to a space where we actually do recognize what we're doing, like this is just one of the rings on the tree. So this is the 2 years when you actually look at the center of the tree where the rings are showing. Oh, look at that! That's when the pandemic was. Look how spiky it is. Oh, look at that fat part. That's where people were kind of, yay, we're gonna do online, and then see it got thin again. I'm like, oh, people are like, this sucks. So maybe what we need to do is to get a decade out from this moment, and we need a few more iterations of what this looks like. But for me right now, the place that I like to press into, if you have, even a small cohort of kids that are saying, I want online learning, we have to offer it. Because that's the other part of this, is that we're no longer in a space, and every rule indicates this. Your existence indicates this, is that whatever model we think school should be, it's not. It is official that this is, I'm going to use this word intentionally. It is client centered. It is entirely client centered. And if we're not working towards a client centered model, then we're actually working against the overall philosophy of how people perceive school right now. Did the pandemic um, actualize this and accelerate it? Yep. But like you said, that stuff's not going back in the box. And I think anybody that I think the choice is not the choice is no longer whether or not you're going to offer it. Like it really is at what point will you? Like you have to find a space to say, if you're in your first 5 years of teaching right now, you really need to figure out what your version of teaching looks like on from a client-centered perspective. And if that means you have to think about having a digital platform, you have to. If that means you don't do it unless you have to, that's fine too. But accept the fact it's here. Like you have to. I think you have to do that. Whether you
It
like it's one of those where you like it or not. This is the spinach. Eat it.
it seems to me like it's only client-centered when the people who are calling it that, it works for them. It's the same with student-centered. It says right in the middle of my description, it says that I'm supposed to employ student-centered, um, ideas and activities in collaboration with 8,000 people. But
Mhm,
guess what? Half those 8,000 people don't care about the student-centered approach. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying I point to it on the paper. I'm like, it says that this is what's going to work for the kid. So to you, it's just it's the 10th chance. For me, it's student-centered.
mhm.
So what do you want me to do? Do you want me to, like, this is what used to confuse me. It doesn't confuse me anymore because I know some people just want to do things their way, whether it works for a kid or not. That's the biggest pet peeve of mine is when we talk about student-centered, and like half the people I meet don't believe that. Sometimes I don't believe it. In order for something to work for a student, it generally has to work for the person delivering it. So can we not ignore that? Like I say to teachers, this is okay. I'm going to give you a great example without giving you the example because I don't want to give away where it happened. Student student doesn't want to go to school for a particular reason. The first thing I think is, okay, what's the student want here? What's the student looking for? I knew exactly what it was, but there was not enough time to action a plan because I was telling you yesterday, my kids, they operate at the speed of light. Like they make decisions quickly and there's no like debating or whatever. So kid says he's not going to school. Right away in my mind, I had a plan, but I didn't enact the plan because I'm supposed to collaborate with other people. So I'm supposed to check in with at least two other people to see if my plan, if they would accept it. And I was fully ready to back it in terms of it wasn't Roland suggest, it was this is what Roland suggests, and this is what Roland's going to do to make it work. So it's not going to stress anybody else out. It's on me, not on anybody else. But because there are other people involved and because it's their space, I'm not going to do that. So it after it was all said and done, the kids stayed home. The mom went to work because mom's got to work. So then I talked to one of the staff members at the school and they're like, "Oh, this really sucks." And I'm like, "Yeah, it does. This is what I wanted to do. What do you think?" They're like, "Oh, that would have worked with me." I said, "Awesome." But like we didn't it was what 7:45 in the morning. So I know you're not checking emails yet because you're dealing with your kids and getting to school. I really should I be talking to the mom at that time? That's the time I decided to check in because I realized they have to eat, get in the car, go to school. So I'm trying to be proactive. So I said to the staff member, I said, "Sorry, this is what I would have done, but I didn't wanna pretend like I'm running the school or I'm running your room. Not gonna happen." And so because none of us could be on the same page at that particular time, this kid fell through the cracks again. What are we gonna do to get the kid back? I was actually thinking student-centered. I was communicating at a time that maybe other teachers wouldn't. I was ready to give up part of my day to make something work that I thought would have brought the kid into the school. If I start making those decisions on my own, then I'm no longer being collaborative. And it says in my description that I'm collaborative and I'm reminded often that I don't do this by myself. I'm reminded often. Okay, I don't do this by myself, but that means that, again, student-centered falls through the cracks sometimes. Rochelle did answer your question, Chris.
Sweet.
Rochelle said she can get home before the meeting and have dinner ready for her young child, before it's too late at night.
Say
She's
the
able
words. Say
she's
the words.
she's able to participate in initiatives that she's passionate about and still be there for her family. And there it is.
I
There it is.
so I'm gonna let me lean against that for a second because it reminds me of I told you this week, you've inspired me or you've lit up a part of my brain that was kind of dormant. Last week at our PA day, we went to our alt ed site and I got to reconnect with my past, it felt like, because some of the individuals there I know from back in the day when I was alt ed head at a school. Um, it kind of realigned my purpose. It was funny. It was roots. It was a roots moment, right? Getting back to the almost a seed moment, maybe not seed, but roots. Um, and I came away from that thinking to myself, man, I think I want to go back and do that programming again. Like it actually was that enticing, right? Um, and then I went and then, they were listening to people ask questions about it. So I didn't ask any questions while I'm there. I was just soaking it in. I was taking some photos. I think I did, I'm school council, the teacher rep. So I was there taking pictures because I knew that I was, speaking to school council on Monday night, just kind of the teacher report. So I wanted to have some stuff from there. And as always, as I'm listening, not as always, but again, as I'm listening to the questions that my colleagues are asking while we're at this alt ed site, you start to realize like this is great, it's curiosity, but also some of the shape of the conversation means that not everybody is clear on where alt ed fits in regular school, right? And I use that's intentional now because alt ed back in the day, that idea that it's alternative is problematic in the same way that I find education is special. I find that that's problematic too. I don't like either one of those terms because making it making the tools and the structures that work in alt ed. I get that there are reasons why they work in alt ed, but there's elements in because we say that because we other sometimes the kids that are a part of what we call alternative programs, what doesn't happen often is the reciprocity of good practice to come back to what we consider to be the center. So we, you leave, let's say, neurotypical programming pedagogy, let's say, as a teacher in a big school to go and work in this other space, alternative space, to do alternative programming or engagement uh in your role. But there isn't clear reciprocity where by going out there into the lab, so to speak, like going off campus to do teaching, what's actually learned there doesn't benefit the center. It doesn't come back in. What we kind of end up saying are stuff like, well, we're so glad that you're over there doing that work, or I'm so happy that you are doing this role. It's so necessary. And I find often in those conversations, what is not being acknowledged, the fact that the plain fact that you're sort of saying that this one special person can only do the work is suggesting that only that one special person can do the work. What's the lessons learned? How do we bring that back to the center? Way back in the day at a staff meeting, I did a session called Alt Ed for regular teachers, and I presented to them a list, kind of case study, but just moments from my day, and I asked two questions. What How did I put the questions? What is your version of this? What is your version of this? So what's your like regular at the time I say, what's your regular classroom version of this pedagogical tactic? So one of the ones that I had, for example, and you've had similar experience, was walking down to a park that was near the school to find my students on my prep to get them to class that day, or at least to get them into the school, or get them to somewhere safe. Students that were living in the park. So I gave that to them. I said, what's your in class version of this? And right away, my follow-up question was, or just concept was, as you think about this, what's your line? So where do you draw the line as a classroom teacher? And people kind of got that. They're like, okay, well, I would never go looking for my students in the park. Wouldn't do that. I'm like, okay, so there's your line. You're not going to leave the school to walk down the street. It was less than half a block, the park that I walked to. Um, but I said, so what would be your version of this though? Because this is my if I'm accounting for my communication log and my pedagogy and my everything else that you're putting into your lesson plan, I could account for this under the equity banner, working with neurodivergent students, special education. I could put it into there as this is something that I do before I actually, like, this is 3-part lesson plan. This is the step I have to take before I even make it to the 3-part lesson plan. I need to walk to the park to see if my student is there, to remind them to come to class. They don't have a watch. They don't have a watch. They don't have any caring adult necessarily that's going to activate them. So I'm going to walk down as the coach and say, okay, Jimmy, time to come to class. And that's part of my prep. That's how I remind students that they can come to school, they can be in school, that I want them in school. Remember when we talked about that? There was that one line, do you actually want your students in class? And we're amazing sessions because it really does speak to the space between the common understanding of education and what's actually happening in education. And we bubble ourselves, we silo ourselves, whatever you want to say. You close your classroom door, you manage the 30 kids in front of you. I get that that is one of the realities. But at the same time, in the exact same system, you're walking a kid to school, and I'm going down to the park to wake a kid up to say, come on, let's go do civics and careers. And they're like, okay, Clef will be there in 5 minutes. I just gotta pack up my stuff here. I'm like, okay, cool.
So my traditional classroom teacher brain, you know, tells me I can see where the lines are drawn on what I will do, how I will do it. Okay.
Hmm.
But my alternative learning re-engagement brain has different boundaries, different lines because of the nature of the work.
Hmm.
So I've realized, I know it's going to sound weird, maybe, I've realized my classic center teaching brain doesn't fit with the periphery re-engagement brain, alternative learning brain. They don't mesh well. So I've
Hmm.
noticed that part of my job is to try to help those two things come together with the classroom teacher and me on the fringe. Um, it is, for some people, it is very difficult for them. What I'm finding is some people are really pushing back on it. And then my pushback is, this is my job. So, like, I'm not, nobody recommended I come and I offer these things. This is my job. This is why I'm being paid. It's not like, this is my job. Just like your job is to deliver curriculum. Um, your job is instruction and supervision with those kids in the classroom. My job is re-engagement. How do I bring them back to school? And so let's work together. Let's try to harmonize what this looks like. Um, and I know there's lots of layers there that complicate things. I get it. I do.
I
Um,
really love those complications, bro.
I know you do. I know you do. But it's, bro, for the classroom teacher who doesn't have a math mark for a kid and has to write a report card, this is difficult for them. It's
Hmm.
difficult for them to acknowledge the fact, because there's lots of layers. Then you got to have a conversation with your principal and you need permission. Like, there's lots of layers, right? I get that because I've been there. But I'm on the other end now. I'm not writing the report card. I'm just telling the teacher, you're not going to have a math mark. Let go of the math for a minute so we can get the kid in the building, because the kid hates math. So let's not go there right away with the kid. Can we start somewhere else, please? There's the negotiation, there's the harmonization.
Yeah,
I want to give two thumbs up to my school board because
do it
they just posted online, like a post, an article, whatever you want to call it,
on
about the
Twitter.
on their webpage. So on the
Okay.
WCDSB webpage, there's an article. The title is WCDSB Graduation Rates Consistently Higher Than the Provincial Average. And the two thumbs up for my school board goes to the fact that this article speaks to the fact that this it WCDSB says that they understand that not everyone learns at the same pace or in the same ways. That the path to graduation is a process, not a race. So basically, if we step back, I'm talking we like my school board, we step back and we look at if we just look at the graduation rates for the stereotypical centered student, 4 years, 3, 4 years, you're in, you're out,
Mhm,
that's one lens. But if there's another lens, there's a lens of kids that takes them 5 or 6 years. There's a lens of kids that leave and come back because they realize that there's a pathway for them, right? So, for example, like the work that the student success consultants do, the work that re-engagement does, the work that specialist high skill majors program brings to the table, um, dual credit, Ontario Youth Apprenticeship, co-op, active living, community living. If you then take your lens and recalibrate it for those things, you'll see that we have hundreds of kids that graduate that aren't included in the lens that the ministry uses for stereotypical graduation stuff. This lights me up because they're actually looking at the periphery. They're saying, yeah, we see the kids at the center. The kids at the center are going to graduate in 4 years. That's what kids at the center do. The kids on the outside, they don't graduate in 4 years. So if we just forget about them, what are we doing? We're not serving all our clients, right? We're not being student centered if we
mhm,
ignore them. I talked to my SO yesterday, and she told me that last year, two, 230 some students graduated that were periphery students. Dude, that's the size of an elementary school. So
mhm.
we're just going to ignore that success? That's success. We led kids to graduate from high school in one way or another. I think that's fantastic. I'm a little bit biased because I do this work on the periphery, but I think it's fantastic. We can't ignore it anymore. COVID, COVID has done a lot of things. One of them has brought to our attention the equity issues within education um, and inclusion. And so, if we're really trying to be equitable and inclusive, then we need to look at all our students and do what we can. That's the part that keeps me up at night.
Hmm.
Is I'm thinking about my kids who won't talk to me for whatever reason and won't go to school, and it's like I'm here for a short period of time, right? If like I'm here for a short period of time, if I can't if I can't get a connection for them, what happens next? I don't know. Like when I'm out of the picture, who will be in the picture and how will they be in the picture? Because right now I have lots of flexibility.
Mhm.
Like I'm literally in their face or try to be in their face every single day to connect, learn, build that relationship because eventually it's going to have to be handed off to somebody else. I don't know. Will they do the same thing? I don't know. Will it be within their prerogative? I don't know.
Well, I would actually argue, no, they shouldn't be doing the same thing. That's a given. The change must be allowed to happen. So that's the other part that sometimes can kind of what you just said, I'm gonna hear as, will the kids still be supported in some way? That's what I'm gonna start at that point. But understanding that the support that's being provided, if client-centered, means that there is no way that they could be doing the same thing as you. Because one of the things I will say is that this stuff's going to change. There's going to be an element of adjustment. There's going to be different ways to look at it, and on top of which, the person coming into the role should bring their perspective into it, whatever the work is. So I like to say that because there's I think that line can be interpreted like somehow the job that you've created is the path. I think, we talked about, um, one of our colleagues that had when they left the role, they had everything scheduled all the way out to the end of the year. And the individual stepping into the role then had to be accountable to all of these things that that previous person who held the role thought was important. That's great as long as it's actually important. But to rate what's important moving forward when you're taking over a role, that's really difficult. And to be accountable for somebody else's deliverables, that's a tricky space to be in, right? Um, and I won't say whether I agree or disagree. I just think it's in that moment you need to slow shit down and really look closely at whether or not that fits the mandate that you would like to grow. It also assumes somehow like you're not arriving with ever any understanding of what the actual needs are, and somehow you have to continue somebody else's project. So I know for a fact that when I stepped away from Access, stuff changed. They started doing things differently. When I arrived there, I changed stuff too. And I've kind of written about it. I didn't go about it a great way. I did not see the culture shift. I was very pragmatic. I was just updating, getting stuff up to speed, and in doing so, disregarded the depth of experience. So there's stuff there, right? Like there's stuff there that to slow down and actually know if that's useful. Just like Rochelle was saying, to slow down and actually know whether or not that's the need. This is some I've encountered this past year. I'll say in the past 2 years, what I've encountered over the last couple years is this idea that EDU actually doesn't know what's best for EDU or the students that are in EDU. And I mean that both in a cheeky sense of it, but also understanding EDU draws a line over which it won't cross. And I'm encountering those spaces often, not as like, the ominous voice in my head, but individuals that hold power who do represent the actual borders within education. Like they're standing there at the gate, thou shalt not pass. Sometimes they have a really great rationale why that is. Money can be a thing, protocol can be a thing, equity can be a thing, reason that we stop. But there's an element of chasing squirrels in this that I'm encountering more and more spaces where EDU doesn't actually have the tools to know what's good for it. And it needs to be dependent on individuals like you and individuals in alt ed spaces to kind of say, kind of grab the lens and draw it over and say, you need to look at this more closely. And you need to take into consideration that if I'm going to a park to find a kid for class, that's no longer an outlier. That's a fact of EDU. So we're going to work on this for a bit. Let's work on this thing. And if we choose not to, I think the part of accountability is getting comfortable with the fact of calling that out. Calling it out as directly as possible so that we have people on the record saying, I'm not going to work on that, or we're not going to work on that. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, dude.
That was a bit of a rant, but yeah, you're welcome.
I've been ranting the whole morning.
Feels good though, eh? Get it
It
out.
does. I feel like I'm about 10 pounds lighter. I didn't have to do any exercise either.
No, I'm still heavy. But I feel like I've connected words and thoughts that are rattling around a bit. Harmonized, actualized, bro. Harmonized, actualized.
Can you show us what you've drawn today, if anything? I shouldn't assume. Brain and heart and lungs, correct?
Yep. Well done.
Hey, you're the artist. Thanks
You
for
did
sharing.
it. Yeah. Sometimes.
Well, it was good to see you again, Chris.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I missed
Back
you
in the
last
saddle.
Saturday.
Well, thank you. I missed you too. Back in the saddle, at least for one episode.
That's right. We'll see what happens next.
Hey, we're creeping up on our Christmas extravaganza, aren't we?
You want to tell me more about what that is?
I will in due time.
Oh, are you talking Christmas cookie exchange?
I don't know. We could do that. Let's put it in the mail, see if it arrives. You and I.
Listen, I've changed my tune about the Christmas cookie exchange.
Okay.
I'm now disgusted. I don't want to eat other people's cookies.
Oh, I love that. I was actually someone got me talking about some of my food peculiarities, at work, and talk about a moment where they couldn't stop listening because it was not, it wasn't great, but like I definitely overshared, and I think in that moment they realized like they were sort of in a python grip and they couldn't get out because I was talking about, you know, the way I look at buffets and how I watch people's cleanliness and I sort of measure people ahead of time whether or not I would ever eat their food. Like I watch them eat their lunch. Like I'm just like it's all these silly kind of nuances. And this person's just like, I just asked you if you like artichokes. I'm like, I'm complicated.
I I can't give too much. I can't give too much detail, but I was talking to somebody recently about potluck that they were going to do at their site,
Oh man,
and
see,
I
that's
said, and they said, I'm not participating. I said, why? And I got the hands up in the air like my system's already like weak. What if I eat something that's been out too long, or I don't know how it was. Like they started going down the Clough Road, and I did one of these, and I'm like, I think I'm done. Like I don't think I can ever do a potluck again. Um,
I
so
do, I will, but sometimes it's problematic. Like I'm that's where my brain went,
Irma said
cookie
her
exchange.
brain went to the
Yeah.
cookie exchange too.
I will eat other people's food, but you know, if I'm working with Irma, I'm watching. If I know a potluck's coming up, I know, let's say a cookie exchange is coming up, and it wouldn't matter if it was Irma, but if Irma and I work together, I'd be watching in general to see like,
Mm,
you know, when Irma brings a lunch in, do I see an ice pack in there?
right,
Right?
right, right.
When Irma eats a sandwich, do they leave it on the corner? And then, you know, I see them pull it out. They're walking the halls eating the sandwich. And then I go to the office and say, Irma, you know, I need some support with something. And I see that sandwich just sitting on the corner of the
Mm,
desk. Now, Irma, not saying you do, but this is what my brain does. So then the cookie exchange comes around, and you know, Irma's like bringing in the cookies. I'm like, yeah, I'm not eating Irma's cookies. And
listen,
now I'm not the person that sits in the room and like scowls and says, "Yeah, don't eat Irma's cookies because this is my oven." I don't do that. I don't do that. I just make the decision for me. However, I will say my spouse has gotten used to in those moments. I'm the canary in the cave. So so Karen will watch to see in general. We don't work together. We don't work together anymore, but we did. And um when we did work together, she would watch to see what plates I would go to at the buffet because she would walk away after she's like, "Oh, I don't feel so good." I'm like, she goes, and then she goes, "I think it was X." I'm like, "It wasn't that. It was the coleslaw." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "That coleslaw. It wasn't on ice. That was mayonnaise in there, and the person had it on their desk all morning." I'm like, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm sorry. I didn't want to out everybody." So sorry, what was Irma does the same thing? Irma's
so
like watching other people's
Irma's
cleanliness, like,
yeah, it
yeah,
appears as though Irma's on the same page. She
yeah,
thought
me
she
and
was
Irma.
alone. She's
So
not.
to that end, okay, Irma, I'm eating your cookies. Like if you've got the same mindset, you're icing the stuff, you're zipping it up, you're washing your hands, you're putting it in the fridge, right? You're not sitting there eating a few of your cookies as you bring them in. The crumbs are all, my cookies are the best. Like you're not doing that, right? What was the other thing you put up there? There was another one I saw.
Dominique said Christmas potluck sign up went out this week at her school, and her brain does the same thing.
Dominique, you know it. My own children. So here's the thing. Maybe every parent can appreciate this. When you're sort of like giving some heat to your kid, and your kid says to you, "I promise I won't do it again." I look them in the eye and say, "That promise holds no water. I've been watching you for a month. You're not about to change your behavior. You're just trying to get what you want." So I do the same thing when it comes to the buffet stuff. Someone walks in and the thing is actually got beautiful Christmas wrapping on it. My brain still goes, "But I saw you come in the bathroom and walk out without washing your hands. You think I'm eating your meatballs? That ain't happening." Or the crock pot's sitting out in their car and they think that it's cool enough outside midwinter just to leave it out there cold. It doesn't work like that, bro. Not if you brought it in hot. So it's sitting warm in the back seat and you think the outdoor temperature in, you know, December is going to cool it down time. That's a bacteria spa date. There's no way I'm doing that. I don't care how much you heat it up.
Rochelle says that she's with you for even more reasons. Um,
See, potluck with individuals that are as fastidious as us, right? Like it's
basically what it looks like. If the bunch of us were to have a potluck right now, it would look like we would all arrive in the same space and just eat the food we
Hazmat
brought
suits
for
on.
our stuff. Like, I'm not eating anybody else's food.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wanna add, though, I saw Irma a few times this week. Actually, I think I see Irma, like, almost daily,
Mhm.
almost, and, she's been buzzing, going back and forth. This is what a vice principal does, right? They buzz, they
Yep.
go, they act, they react, they proact.
Hummingbird
Yeah.
stuff, just like yep.
No, I have to call her a bee because she dressed up
Okay.
as a bee for Halloween, but she's buzzing like a bee. So
Mhm.
now what I wanna do, and it's no secret, but actually, Irma, we might be able to have some fun with your principal. The next time I visit, what I should do is bring in like a cold meat sandwich and just
Oh.
leave it on the conference table in your principal's office, and then walk away and hope she doesn't see it because I know how busy she is, and we can have some fun with that. And you can just, Irma, if she says like where'd the sandwich come from, you can say it's rolling, just leave it there. He'll eat it when he comes back and see what she does. So let's have some
That's
fun with
awesome.
this, okay?
I like
But
it.
no, I can't unsee. I Okay, so Irma's in. Okay, Irma. It's gonna be a disgusting sandwich, but we'll pretend like I'm in. And then
Okay.
I will never get invited to that school for a potluck, which I'm okay with. But anyway, um, yeah, I'm done. If I were to do a Christmas cookie exchange, um, I would I guess I would sign up to give people cookies, but I don't think I'll take any. So,
Now, I will if I had never met, and I can't use Irma anymore, if I had never met Jimmy on staff,
Jimmy,
if I'd never met Jimmy on staff and Jimmy shows up with cookies, I have no prejudice against Jimmy, apart from seeing like I'll look at the product right in front. Or as Jimmy's putting it down, I could see his hands are covered in some schmutz. Like that, it would just be the immediate judgment as to whether or not make more sense. Like I'm not watching Jimmy. So Jimmy walks in, puts the cookies down, unwraps it. The wrapping looks like it was done tightly. I'm thinking, okay, I'll eat Jimmy's cookies. And I do eat things that I have no clue about how they were made, right? You and I have gone out for food. We've gone to places where it's because we're craving the food and we don't stick around to do a health inspection. We come back and grab the food and we go sit out back and we eat it. And, who knows if we've risked death in the past, right? We'll roll the dice. We don't know exactly. We're not health inspectors. And sometimes we both just order and leave and go walk out and wait and get called back in. So we don't know, if they're doing any sneaky business and not prepping it well. But what my brain can't do, and I attribute this entirely to my restaurant brain mindset, is just I know things. I know I can't and you say I can't unsee that. I know things. And for some people it's comedic. You laugh. Sometimes Karen does too. But I also know that, for a little while there, she was relying on me as
mhm.
like the litmus for whether or not stuff has been prepared properly. And there isn't 100%, but there are some small steps you can take to make yourself to avoid, the obvious.
Okay,
Like
so
I'm not eating that bread. You know what the biggest one? Can I
wow,
get out to all of our listeners?
yes,
Never eat the stuffed, the dip stuffed pumpernickel bread. Never. Don't do it. Too complicated. It's too complicated. It's too moist potential. It's too volatile. It's too hazardous. Don't do it, friends. You wonder why you're driving home at night and you feel like you're gonna blow yourself out. It's because you probably had the pumpernickel dip bread. Just telling you. Just telling you. It's
Christmas.
mishandled. It's mishandled, and it's the thing that's gonna pop up at your potluck, right?
If school, excuse me,
So
if schools have face-to-face parties, potluck anymore, I so look forward to attending just to observe, just to observe. I want to attend to observe, and then I'll bring something safe in case people want something to eat. I don't know what else to say.
I don't
Um,
know.
I will tell you though, that I'm looking forward to having some fun with this
Mhm.
again. And the school that I work at, I don't know the people. Like, so please don't think that I'm commenting on the school I work at. We've not
Mhm.
done potlucks or anything like that. So, um, I but I can't do it anymore. So Christmas cookie exchange, if I initiate one, I'm happy to make the cookies and bring them in. Whether people want them or not is a different thing, but I don't think I'll be accepting. I will not be accepting any cookies. Um, and I would like to say before we shut down, I want to share a quick story about a Christmas
Yeah.
party I did go to at my last school.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm gonna name it. I worked at St. John's, and we had
Okay.
a. This was pre-COVID, where everybody was in everybody's face 24/7 in society, and we had a Christmas party at the vice principal's house, and it was a potluck. And so my buddy and I, Mike, we were like, we're gonna be the stars of the show, and we're gonna bring KFC because half the crew were like poo-pooing us, like you guys are like lowbrow. Then the other half were like, KFC, bring it on, right? So we go to KFC and we get like this big meal or whatever. We bring it over, we put it on the dining room table, and there's food everywhere, okay? And it was the vice principal's house, and the vice principal was adamant that we were not going to start eating until her, I think she had a ham in the oven. We were not allowed to eat until the ham came out.
I already see problems
And,
rising here. Keep going.
and I don't think she listens to Decoded podcast, but
She's
so
welcome to.
so
The
what happened.
administrators are welcome to listen to us. They are welcome. You're welcome at our table. Eat.
So Mike and I are starving, and we're just staring at this table, and there's food everywhere, right? And our principal comes in, and hey, Karen, word up to Karen T. She's listening. She's a superintendent in a board around here, and her brother was my principal. So Paul's there, and Mike and I are like, "Hey, PG, um, like, can we eat?" VP says we can't eat until the ham comes out, but like we're starving. So he's like, open the box of KFC. So we
Oh
pop
no.
we pop the bucket. PG, like a good Stratford boy, he goes right into that bucket. I look at Mike, I'm like, it's on. The principal's eating, and he outranks her. So
You're looking over, seeing 20 minutes still left on the
well,
ham timer. You're like, this ain't gonna end well.
basically, we turn the clock on for the KFC. We're like, it's on. PG's eating. That means we can eat.
Mhm.
If he's gonna disrespect the VP, which he wasn't, but he's like, I'm hungry too, and he
He's
had to
he's
go. He was
breaking the
going.
rules.
He was going to his son's hockey game or something. So she
Yeah.
walks in. I got gravy in the beard. We're literally grabbing fries and chicken,
Yeah.
and she's like, "What are you doing?" And Mike and I were like, "PG started eating." I'm like, "He's the boss." Like if
Yeah.
and just we're literally looking at her like she's gonna kill us, but we're like, he's the boss. So she's not impressed. People are like, we're eating? We're allowed to eat? And she's
Food's
like,
like, yeah.
the ham is in the oven, and people are like, we don't give a shit
Ham.
about the
Wait
ham.
for the ham.
So what happens is then people start coming in, and guess what everybody's going towards?
I'm gonna guess not the ham. They're going for
PF
the KFC.
PFK, baby.
Yeah.
PFK in French. They're hitting that KFC hard. Me,
Yeah.
Mike, and Paul are like,
You're
we're
sated. You've had your bits. You're good.
we're in
Or you still.
heaven.
Yeah. I love
So
it.
when the ham comes out, then everybody else is invited in, and guess what? All the KFC's gone
Yeah.
because we took care of business. Like people ate
Sneak
the
attack.
KFC.
I like it. You did a potluck sneak attack.
So why am I sharing that story? Because I'm hoping that Sherry does hear this episode at some point and then gives me trouble for it because that was epic, and I just had
I
to relive. That was a buffet potluck, and I did
you
not
want
get sick after.
Yeah, you know what? You wanna dismantle decorum and rules in any potluck, bring takeout. You could do the same thing with a pizza from Pizza Hut, and the more visible, the better. So you bring in a pizza from Pizza Hut with, with garlic fingers or whatever, you bring in KFC. Hell, you roll in with a tray of Big Macs. That's even
It's
better
on.
because that shows scarcity. Someone's looking down. There's like, damn, there's only 12. There's only 12 Big Macs. You say we can cut them in half if you want, but you do that. It is the ultimate disruptor of any potluck. Show up with like some highly visible takeout. I love that. There were props to couple teacher friends, Andrew McClure and William Topova, and they were the art department back in the day when I was at Williams. And the same thing, they were the KFC people. And what was funny, this is the other thing too, it sets precedence, yo. Like I will tell you, it actually became so the thing that Sherry was trying to do with the ham, the thing that Sherry was trying to do with the ham happens so naturally with the takeout. Like the ham just doesn't have the clout to hold that moment. Even if the person's like, but it's ham. Like it just like that Sherry, I'll just say it's bad timing. Like you gotta be ready. You gotta have that ham ready in case someone like Chids rolls in with a Pizza Hut pizza or KFC. Because what ended up happening, because it permanently pivots your party. And the only way that you're gonna get the focus back to the ham ever is to not invite Chids. Because he's now the wild card that's going to show up with something walking. And as you're like, where do I put the KFC? And as you're sort of like doing that, you're walking through the living room, like, where's the
Wow.
kitchen? And yeah, people are like, whoo, whoo, what's going on? That smell of ham is gone. It is gone. And I'll say Topova and McClure, it became a thing. All the food would be out there. No one would even say anything. And they would walk in at random times. Like there was no like at lunchtime, whatever. Let's say you have from 11 to 12 for lunch. Let's say that's the time. There was no guarantee that they would have the KFC like right for 11:05. Sometimes they would roll in at like 11:25, 11:30. All the other eating would stop and people would just watch them walking across the staff room. And then it's like people are looking at each other like, we know there's only like, that's it. Is that a 12 piece? I don't know. Is that a 12 piece? And then you're counting heads in the room. Like, damn it, there's like 25 people in here. Okay, those five don't know because they're first time attendees. But the other 20, okay, those five, they're smelling something, but there's like 18 people over here, 12 piece. I better get up there right away. And then it's on. It's on. So I love that. I love the potluck disruption.
We were, and I have to say, we were looking to disrupt. We were like, we knew what was going to be the
Yeah.
pinwheels and all like the what were you talking about? The pumpernickel bread with the
Oh, you know
it's
it.
all going to be there. So we're like, we're not playing.
The
We're bringing
meatballs,
KFC.
yeah, the meatballs in the crock pot. Someone decides to bring chili. Like, come on. The second layer of disruption that's almost as funny. The individuals that walk in with their own cutlery and like takeout container. I like what that does to the potluck. That suggests like, oh, like that's a major game on. Because then you couple that with the KFC, and you're like, that a-hole's taking a piece for later. They're going so that 12 piece is just -2 right now because they're going to take one for now. They're like, oh, this is delicious. And then you look down, you're going to see that Tupperware container sweating up with a thigh for later. It happens.
So before we go, we have some chit chat here in
Okay.
the comments. So I want to share.
Share it out. Share it out.
So Irma drops Irma. Uh, mission accepted, the bologna sandwich mission. Bring on the fun and chaos. I
Yeah.
can't wait because like, with all due respect, Irma and her principal are running ragged. Okay, like there's no way to sugarcoat that. They are busy people.
Busy. Yeah.
I'm sure I can drop that sandwich in there without the principal even knowing. So that's gonna be good.
It's good. Put it in
Rochelle.
a drawer. In a drawer.
Oh no, no, I'm not touching drawers. It just
Okay.
it's gonna live on the conference room table.
I love it.
I might write on it Roland in a Sharpie. So then whatever.
Bring a second sandwich and cut it into pieces and say go like a little card that says go ahead. Like go ahead, have a bite.
I don't know if
Roland's,
I'm gonna go
everybody,
there, bro.
that'll be
But
awesome. Okay.
at least there will be a sandwich, a deli sandwich in a bag that's
Look
mine.
at this.
But anyway,
We're having like dinner chat here. This is Rochelle
and Irma.
and
So
Irma having a conversation over in the corner
yeah,
now.
I
I like
love it.
this.
And nobody here is gonna give them trouble for it. We're gonna be, hey, Rochelle and Irma, stop. We're not gonna do that. So
Yeah.
anyway, Irma,
Unless they go
LOL.
for the KFC, then I'm like, I'll be mad.
Dominique, yo, could I bring the Taco Bell party
That's
pack?
awesome.
I say yes, you should. Oh,
That is
Taco
awesome.
Bell.
Yeah. So sorry, who said that, Rochelle or Dominique?
No, Dominique said that.
Yeah, Dominique. So you're gonna bring the fries supreme. Put a fry supreme on the table with like some tongs and watch people try to navigate that. Pick up like these oversauced cheesy fries. That's all. Put a poutine on the table.
Oh yeah,
Oh, oh, gee, yeah.
yeah,
I see you and I are like, that's good. Just a that would actually kind of work. I'm doing the logistics now. Like just a great big tray of
a poutine.
fries with
Yeah,
gravy and melted cheese. Oh, this is awesome. I think we're. I think I'm back in with potlucks. I think I just need to. I want to be the potluck disruptor.
I love that. So then Irma,
Mhm.
okay, so then
I
Irma
like this.
responds, right? I'm laughing, thinking about it at
This is
Rochelle.
awesome.
And then Irma also says, as a teacher, I always had my kids set a paper towel placemat. It was
Yep.
wonderful. It was the Louise thing to do.
Yep.
Dominique rolls in with the paper towel placemat is key.
It is. We know that sanitizes, protects, and it's entirely magical and sets boundaries. Don't get crumbs outside that. Real placemats. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Rochelle responds with Irma, I used to have real placemats for my students at lunch. And
Hmm.
knowing Madame Cooker, she did. So
Yep. That's
oh,
awesome.
this was Decoded Podcast, episode season 6, episode 12, number 220. Um, let's see
I'm
what
hungry.
happens next week. I'm hungry too, bro.
I gotta go.
Um,
There's no leftovers. There's not much. I
okay.
gotta go find something. I'll see what the fam's eating.
I'm
It was good
starving and
connecting with you, dude. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have to leave. So that like I have to leave the house. So I might come home with one of these things. I would tweet it out, but I know you won't get it, Cluff. So
Dun dun dun. Zinger.
have a good one, bro.
Peace, man.
Thanks everybody for listening and
Yeah, yeah.
chiming in. It
Thanks.
was fun.
It was a lot of